Good evening. Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to Texas Christian University, and welcome to the 11th Annual Schieffer Symposium on the News. My name is Victor Bashini, and I am privileged to work here and get to introduce this great group tonight. We're fortunate indeed that our own Bob Schieffer annually brings a world-class panel of thought leaders to Texas Christian University. This night is always a lively discussion of topics vital not only in the field of journalism, but also in society as a whole. We're delighted to welcome members of the greater community to our campus to share in this conversation. And we're proud that our students have the opportunity to learn from some of the best minds in the field of communications. But before we begin tonight, please permit me to share some facts about the face of Face the Nation and the namesake of TCU's College of Communication, Bob Schieffer. First, I'd like to note that we proudly call Bob Dr. Bob Schieffer in recognition of a Doctor of Humane Letters he was awarded by TCU in 1986. Bob has been a lifetime reporter, and as a reporter for more than half a century, he's been front and center in the communications revolution. From print media, including reporting the news for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and penning several New York Times bestsellers, to radio and film, to 46 years with the CBS television network, where he has covered all four major Washington beats and brought substantial increases in ratings while serving as the interim anchor of the CBS Evening News. The Library of Congress has named Dr. Schieffer a living legend. That is because of his achievements and the recognition that never stops for him. It has been my tradition at this symposium to mention significant new honors that Bob has received prior to the last 12 months. This year is no different. For example, Face the Nation is again the #1 Sunday morning program in public affairs for the third consecutive year. There's a new... He's gotten yet another Emmy in the last 12 months, his 8th, and it's on display in the Bob Schieffer Memorabilia Room in the Mountie Building. And Dr. Schieffer became the first journalist ever to be honored by the Texas Lyceum with its Stewardship of Texas Values Award. To give you an example of the caliber of folks who win this, the last 3 winners were Nolan Ryan, Dr. Denton Cooley, and Roger Staubach. The TCU family is proud to claim 2 Schieffers. Pat Schieffer, Bob's wife, is also a Horn Frog graduate and a member of our Board of Trustees. Both Pat and Bob are vital to the life of our university. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bob Schieffer.
Thank you all. Thank you. You know, wow. I am, of course, wearing the purple socks, as I always do. You know, every year we have this. This is the 11th time that we've done it, and every year I'm convinced, well, people have already seen this. No one will come this year, and I believe this is the largest crowd we've had over the last 11 years. So that's so. That makes me feel so good, and we have just an outstanding panel this time, and I think you will agree as we get into the discussion tonight. But you know, the first thing I want to do is thank Margaret Kelly and Nancy Stiles of the Chancellor's Office, who really do the work in putting this thing together. We could not do it without them, and I'd just like to recognize them and say thank you to them.
It is a lot of work. Yay, Margaret.
I'd also like to thank John Lumpkin, who retired as head of the Schieffer School, the division of the college that is about journalism. I'd also like to thank Dr. David Willock, who is getting a promotion. He's going to become an associate provost. He is the dean of the Schieffer College at this time, and I really want to thank both of them for the contributions that they have made over the last 5 years. It is really appreciated. I also want to thank members of the CBS News team who came down here. Television is nothing if not a team sport. It takes a lot of people to get a television program on the air. And some of my favorite people and some of those who have worked with me for the longest time are here tonight, and I want to recognize some of them, starting with my long-suffering assistant, who is about to become one of our campaign embed correspondents. This is a huge jump and a great honor to be chosen for this. And her co-worker and a young woman who helps us every Sunday get the program on the air, who is also going to become one of the embeds, Jackie Alamany. Kylie and Jackie are here tonight. Also, we call Jackie A because Jackie B is Jackie Berkowitz, and she is the publicist for Face the Nation. And yeah, we do call people and tell them when we're doing good, you know, and that's one of the things that Jackie does. She is here tonight. Also, Chris Isham, my great friend and the bureau chief of CBS News in Washington. David Rhodes, the president of CBS News, is with us here tonight. Also, Mary Hager, who has been my friend and colleague for over 25 years and is now the executive producer of Face the Nation. She is here tonight, as well as my former assistant, who is now a rising star at ESPN. She is one of the anchors of the ESPN show on Saturday's SEC Game Day. She flew here directly from Indianapolis, where she was covering the basketball tournament. If the Frogs make it to the College World Series this year, she will be one of the key reporters covering the College World Series. She is Kaylee Hartung. All of you, would you all stand up and just let folks see you? There they are. I'm just really so proud of all of them, and they're a great group. And if you wonder, so many of them seem to be females. Let me tell you something. Journalism, women are coming to the forefront. There was if you know a little bit about journalism history, you know that broadcast journalism was really invented by a group of extraordinary men put together by Edward R. Murrow. The group was known as Murrow's Boys, and they basically, covering World War II, invented everything that we do. Everything, the way they figured out how to do it, was a template for how we do it now. Well, I'm here to tell you, Murrow's Boys have been replaced by CBS's women. They're on the forefront of everything that we do. I don't know what these guys are doing when they go to college, but the people that are coming to CBS are moving to the front very fast are the women. We've got a couple of them here tonight. But first, I'm going to start by, I think every panel should have somebody in my demographic, and the one who is in that demographic tonight is the Dean of the Washington Political Reporters, one of the smartest people I've ever known. I've known him for over 30 years, Dan Balz. Dan Balz is the chief correspondent for the Washington Post. He's won every prize you can win in journalism. He's written several books that became bestsellers, #1 bestsellers on the New York Times list. And if you want to really know anything about the state of American politics, he is the go-to guy, my great friend Dan Balz. Very kind. How are you, my friend? The next person I'm going to introduce is my favorite questioner on television, because she always asks the question that I think most people want to know the answer to, but the rest of us are kind of afraid to ask. I think the only mystery, and I hope to find out from her tonight, is do she and Norah O'Donnell decide before each CBS This Morning broadcast which one's turn it is to make Charlie Rose blush? She paid her dues in local television. For 18 years, she was the anchor of our CBS affiliate in Hartford. She was a editor-at-large at Oprah Magazine and had a program on the Oprah Network before she came to CBS News. The incomparable Gayle King. There you are.
Thank you, Bob.
And I want to tell you, Gayle is known for somebody that does her homework, and she told me she bought 3 purple dresses before she got exactly the right color of purple. And she got it,
the right
didn't she?
shade. Yeah.
When you talk about the Murrah boys and then you talk about the CBS women, the young woman I'm about to introduce is without question the bravest person I have ever met. If there's something bad, if there's something dangerous that has happened within a day or two, and maybe an hour or so after it happens, you're going to find Holly Williams there. She has gone into Syria undercover. She has gone into Iraq. She flew here directly from the Middle East to be with us tonight. She started out as a reporter and a producer for the BBC. Later, she went to Sky News. She was a Nieman Fellow. She speaks Mandarin Chinese. She lived in China for 12 years. She has always been a foreign correspondent. And since coming to CBS News, she has covered the outbreak of violence in the Gaza Strip. She was on the other end of the Israeli bombs that were landing there when that awful conflagration broke out. She does just extraordinary things and goes into these places sometimes by herself in disguise. I don't know how she does it, but I admire her. She is also the only person that I have ever met who is from Tasmania. She is the Tasmanian angel, Holly Williams. How are you sitting? And last but not least tonight, someone that I first met on the McGovern campaign. So you know how long ago that was. That produced a book called The Boys on the Bus, which is still the best campaign handbook that I have ever read on politics. P.J. O'Rourke has written 20 books. A couple of them have been huge bestsellers on the New York Times list. Probably one of his biggest selling books was called A Parliament of Whores, which he told us how bad the government was doing when that wasn't cool to tell us how it was. He calls himself a conservative. I think he just doesn't believe anybody about anything. P.J. O'Rourke. Well, I always like to just start with the news, so I'm going to start with Holly. You're just back from there. Bring us up to date. Where do you think things are, and what does the landscape in the Middle East look like right now?
In Iraq specifically, or
Yeah.
broadly? So I just got back from Iraq,
Yeah.
where I went to the outskirts of Tikrit. And we were all surprised to see that, the government of Iraq sent in a force that was led by Shiite militias, which seemed like a kind of a recipe for disaster in a city that's almost entirely Sunni Muslim. There was a sort of sense of triumphalism at the beginning of the campaign for Tikrit, and the Iraqis were saying, we don't need American airstrikes. That lasted about 3 weeks before they called up the Americans and said, we do need American airstrikes. They now seem to have taken back Tikrit, although it's not entirely clear they've completely got rid of ISIS from that area. And the big fear was that the Shiite militias would do as they've done in other areas in Iraq, which is go in and loot, burn down houses, and worse. And that is what has happened. So I guess the big question going forward is how do you take back, first of all, how do you take back Mosul, which unlike Tikrit still has a massive civilian population? And how do you take it back without, exacerbating those sectarian tensions going forward?
How did ISIS suddenly come about? I mean, it just all of a sudden, here's ISIS. And I think it caught the American people, and maybe it caught the government by surprise. I don't know, but it certainly did catch me by surprise. Where did they come from? What did they want?
Well, I guess the truth is that they didn't suddenly come about.
Yeah.
We now know that a lot of the leadership were in Camp Booker, that they were imprisoned by the Americans after the US invasion. And the truth is, even before they swept across northern Iraq last year, we'd certainly been watching them in Syria. We knew that they were building a support base. We'd seen them take control of Raqqa, which is a city that people haven't heard of, but it's a significant place in northern Syria. But certainly, it took us by surprise when they swept across northern Iraq.
Do you see anything resolving itself there in the immediate future? Because now we find ourselves on the side of Iran in some places. At the same time, we're trying to negotiate a deal to bring their nuclear weapon program under control. In other places, we find ourselves fighting against them. If you were to give me a test, and I'd have to say, Sunni, Shia, Sunni, I'm not sure I could keep up with all of that. I know you do, but it seems to me that it's just enormously complicated now, and maybe more so than it's ever been.
It's messy. It's the Middle East, so absolutely. And what's the kind of prognosis? You can't defeat ISIS with airstrikes. You can weaken them. They've been weakened. Everybody on the ground agrees that, particularly in Iraq. But you can't carpet bomb Mosul. I mean, you could, but you'd kill a lot of civilians.
Yeah.
So you need effective ground forces, and that's what Iraq doesn't have, or at least it's very patchy.
How long do you think it will be before the Iraqi military is actually able to be a fighting force that can be effective enough to defeat these people?
Bob, I have no idea. And I think that leaders in Iraq know that it's years. And that's why they're turning to the Shiite militias. That's why outside of Mosul, they're trying to build this Sunni National Guard from the remnants of the city's police force. That's why you have the president of Iraqi Kurdistan meeting with Sunni tribal leaders, clearly bashing their heads together, saying, you guys have to go into Mosul and take the city back.
I must say I agree with you. I see no immediate end to this, but I see the threat of terror is still there. I mean, to me, the war on terror is not over until the terrorists decide it's over. And you can make all the speeches you want to, but I think the threat of terror is still there, and I think there's still a threat to the American homeland. Let me turn to you, Gayle. I guess the big news today was the Boston bomber was found
that the verdict came in today.
guilty.
Yes.
We don't know yet what the sentence is going to be. I know you've been following that closely.
Oh, I've been following it as everybody does, but I just have to say something about Holly. When I got to the hotel today, Bob, I went and I was hugging her, and because I'll email her and say, I'm so worried about you. Are you okay? Please be careful, because she's such a badass when she's out in the field. So I was hugging her and squeezing her, and she goes, why are you squeezing my arms? I said, because I'm so glad you're here and you're all right. I just had to give a little special out, because she's amazing what she does in the field. Sometimes we're watching it, it takes our breath away when we see her in the field. But you're right, the big story today, the verdict came and it was guilty. I don't think that's a surprise. What the next phase we want to see is, will he get the death penalty? And it's so interesting to watch this case progress, because when it first happened, the majority of people in Boston wanted the death penalty. And now, as it got closer to the trial, the end of the trial, the closing arguments, at last count, only 27% wanted Johar Tsarnaev to get the death penalty. And there are very interesting theories about that. Some people say, well, he wants to die, so let's not do that for him. He wants to die a martyr, let's not do that. And then the other side is civilized society doesn't include the death penalty. So that, to me, will be the most interesting thing to see. You know, he's 19 years old, and the whole trial was based on, it started saying he did it. That's how they opened it. He did it. And the defense attorney was, her strategy was, he was under the influence of his brother. Well, you're 19, and when you look at his writings, it was clear the jury didn't buy that. But they spent a lot of time deliberating.
How long is there any, I mean, you can never guess what a jury is going to do, and that's the first lesson you learn as a courthouse reporter, but do you have any sense of, is there any sense of how long it's going to take here, this
No,
deliberation?
they come back next Monday. They come back next Monday and start the penalty phase, so that'll be very interesting. Some people say that that could go longer than the actual trial, because now a man's life is on the line, and there will be, his defense attorney has made it very clear she does not want him to get the death penalty. He has also made it clear, he was praising his brother. He envied his brother that his brother has died. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this case turns out. But there isn't anybody who wasn't in this country on the day of the marathon of all things. You can't get more Americana and their tradition and what it means to the people in Boston. And to sit, guys, and really watch it unfold on your television screen, and to see Martin Richards, and to see, we should all know there's video everywhere, and now how they can track to see where the brothers were and how it happened.
One little
huge
sidebar
story.
to this story, and so much of being a journalist and being a reporter often depends on where you are
Yes.
when news happens. The afternoon that bombing occurred, Kylie Atwood, who I just introduced, my assistant, had just come to work for CBS News, and she'd gone up to Boston to see her best friend who was running in the marathon. And she was positioned down near the finish line, and she decided to move a little more up the street there to get a better picture of her friend as she came by. And it was at that moment that the first bomb went off. Kylie then ran up the street, only the bomb up the street went off. And so she found herself caught between these two. And she called me on the phone and said, I know you've just heard this. I want to let you know that I'm okay. And I said, are you sure you're okay? And she said, yeah, I'm okay. And I said, well, then what you should do is call the assignment desk in New York.
So compassionate and concerned.
Kylie Atwood, a couple of months on the job, called the assignment desk and spent the afternoon on her cell phone talking to Scott Pelley on as we were doing special reporting, and she appeared that evening on the CBS Evening News, and appeared, Norah O'Donnell interviewed her the next morning on the CBS Morning News. She stayed up there a week taking photos with her cell phone. And
But Bob, that is how your brain works when there's a big story.
Yes.
You definitely want to be there, you want to be involved, and you do want to say, are you okay? As long as you're okay. Now, could you please call, because this is a really big deal.
well, that afternoon, she was the only reporter on the scene for CBS News.
Yes,
And
I remember.
so she got off to a pretty good start. But that is what journalism is all about, and I think that's why those of us who are involved in it enjoy it so much. Well, Dan, you're the political expert. Holly doesn't seem to, other than to say it's very complicated, doesn't see how it's going to come out here in the immediate future. So I would like you to just boil down and tell us who's going to get the Republican nomination, who's going to get the Democratic nomination. We'll just put that in the bank, and then we'll all go on to something
I'm going to
else.
defer to Holly on that question, because she could probably make as good a prediction as I could at this point.
Yeah.
I would say that this person named Hillary Clinton has a little bit of an advantage on the Democratic side. I'll go that far out on the limb. The Republican race is as fascinating as one we've seen in many, many years. We look back at the 2012 race, and that was an unusual race with an unusual cast of characters, not many of whom anyone could really see ending up as president. There were some interesting characters, but few that sort of rose to the level of being president. The Republicans this time have a field of candidates who, at least on paper, are better positioned to do that. But who gets there and how they do it is a big question. I mean, Texas is full of political candidates ready to run for president.
I was going to say, in the Texas Republican primary, who do you think is going to finish fourth?
Fourth? maybe Rand Paul will finish fourth here. But you know, I mean, you have in almost every Republican race, you have a series of preliminary contests, and that's what's beginning to take shape now. We've been through the first quarter of the year in which people have been pretending to be candidates and raising money and getting ready, and now we're in the phase in which they're announcing. Rand Paul announced yesterday, and Marco Rubio will announce in a week, and Ted Cruz obviously announced a couple of weeks ago. There is a competition on the side of the very conservative wing of the party. There is obviously competition on the side of the establishment wing of the party. Traditionally, the establishment wing has prevailed. And at this point, Jeb Bush is in a stronger position among the establishment wing, partly because of his name, partly because he's going to have a huge amount of money to run. But we know that there are some big question marks about Bush within the party. You know, there was that period when Mitt Romney was thinking of running, decided ultimately not to do it this time. But in talking to his folks about why they even thought about seriously running, their conclusion was nobody had a better or easier path to the nomination than Romney would have. And I think even with Romney out, you can look at all of these folks and say there are 5 reasons why they can't get the nomination and 4.5 why they might, or 4 why they might. So it is as wide open a race as we've seen. If you look at the polling at this point, Bob, we had a recent poll that had Jeb Bush at 20%. That's as high as anybody has gone, and a lot of other polls don't have him that high. There is a group that's bunched. There's Bush, there's Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, there's Rand Paul. Ted Cruz has had a little bounce up since his announcement. And so it's going to take a while for this to sort out.
What do you, well, let me just go to PJ over here. What do you make of this Hillary Clinton email situation? Do you think this, I think I would agree with Dan that she is an overwhelming favorite right now. Do you think that's going to have any impact?
I just want to know how to do it. You know? I mean, I can't be alone in this room with wanting to know how to clear everything off my computer.
No, PJ, to have a server in your house. That's what I want to, how do you do that?
A server in the house? Yeah, no, I don't. It's all I can do to get broadband, you know, where I live. Yeah, so how's she doing this stuff, you know? But I mean, just, you know, to have every drunken late night keystroke erased. Perfect. Actually, I don't make too much of that as an issue. I think it's just a little on the sort of technical law, you know, yeah, she probably broke some regulation in there, but I mean, we're so regulated in this country that how can you move across the room without breaking some regulation? So I don't think it's going to hurt her, but I think that the whole idea of a yet another Bush-Clinton race, I think we could see voter turnout in the low 1 figures.
Under the I've seen this movie or
it's like
what?
I've been in a coma, you know. So, you know, wake up.
Well, you, in addition to covering American politics, you're now taking on an assignment for the BBC to do a piece on British politics. How'd that come about? I'm in the middle of
the British election is so confusing this year. Now, their parliamentary elections are on May 7th. And it is so confusing this year that they decided the only thing they could do was to bring in a really confused American to shine the cold, hard light of total ignorance on the situation, you know? Because they had a 2 1/8 party system. They had, you know, the conservatives on one side, they were too conservative, Margaret Thatcher. They had Labor on the other side, they were too socialistic, you know, they had all the labor unions and stuff. And then they had the party, the Liberal Democrats, that everybody in Britain actually agrees with, but no one will vote for. Don't ask me why, you know. So the Liberal Democrats had teamed up with the conservatives, with the Tories, for this coalition government. Well, they don't agree on anything. It was like you know, it's like the National Association of Cats and Dogs, you know. And so they didn't agree on anything, and it was like a very strange tangle of a coalition. And the Tories led, and the liberal Dems danced backwards, and so now no one will even talk to them about anything. So then they've got this UKIP party, which is sort of like our Tea Party, but without the festive guns. I like guns. I live in New Hampshire, I like guns. And with like, they think everybody's a foreigner. They think the Welsh are foreign. So they're on the rise, and like nobody knows what to do with that, and except that can their voters find the polling place? That may keep them out. So it's been fun. I know, I just sucked information out of the room on the subject of the British election, which is pretty much what my BBC piece will do.
I want to ask all of you, because I think a lot of people, and people ask me, and especially Holly, you, in this dangerous environment which you work in, do you worry about making people angry with your reports?
Well, first of all, it's not as dangerous as it looks often, what we're doing.
Oh, come on.
I feel compelled to say
Holly.
that. No, it's true, it really is. And I think
I've seen you, Holly, in the middle of gunfire.
When people hear the words Iraq and Syria, they think that
Yeah.
we're definitely taking, terrible, putting us into terrible situations. It's just not true a lot of the time. And as you know, we spend weeks and months planning our trips, and we have a wonderful team of people.
And foreigners are bad shots.
And that's true. A lot of foreigners are bad shots.
Fortunate.
But in a serious way, when you know you're going to do a story that somebody over there is not going to like, does that bother you? I mean, do you take that into account? Are you worried, at the very least, I'll never get another story from this guy?
You'd be surprised.
I mean, I'll tell you myself, back here in Damascus, there's a couple of people in the Obama administration I know I'll never get another story from.
It's interesting how broad-minded, open-minded people are in a part of the world where you don't necessarily expect that. I mean, I remember being in Saudi Arabia late last year, and we'd just taken a chopper ride along the border with Iraq. The Saudis have built this amazing high-tech fence to stop the chaos of Iraq pouring across. And we just shot a stand-up, and we were there with a Saudi general who spoke English and who didn't like what I said at all, and started to talk to me about it, and then said, "But say whatever you want. I'm not here to censor you." I think that's fascinating. That's Saudi Arabia. That's not what you expect, but that was genuinely his attitude. And in Iraq, we'll get feedback sometimes from the Shiite militias didn't like one of our pieces, but they took us out again.
Really?
It's surprising how broad-minded.
PJ, do people ever get mad at you for anything you write?
If I'm doing my job, they do. You bet they do. But I've always been a feature writer. And one thing about a feature writer is it's kind of one and done. I did a piece about South Korea. I covered South Korea's elections, was it like 25 years ago. And I can never go back to South Korea, ever. I called them I said, they're hard drinking, they love to fight and argue, and I said, they're the Irish of Asia, basically. And I think that was the comment that put me over the top. But anyway, I mean, it really was strange. I'm up on stage with the presidential candidate, and he's got a crowd of 500,000 people. And I'm sort of standing to one side. Right down front, where you're sitting, is a kid in a white ski jacket. And it was Kim Dae-jung was the candidate. The kid bites the tip off his little finger and writes Kim Dae-jung for president of the world or something like that on his ski jacket in his own blood. Oh. And I'm looking at this and I said, I've been a foreign correspondent for a long time. This is the first time I've seen anything really frickin' foreign. What's up with that? So I can't go back there. But as a feature writer doesn't he doesn't have to go back to the well. I do my piece about Korea, that's the piece I'm going to do about Korea. I'm never going back to Korea and don't have to do another piece. Trouble is being on a beat. If you're on a police beat, if you're on a court beat, if you're on a political beat, you have to keep going back to some extent to at least some of the same people, so you can't make everybody mad. And that strikes me, and I don't have that situation, that strikes me as being more difficult to deal with. You guys know more.
Gayle, you, of course, are on television every day, and social media, which is something that we're all coming to live with, and it's amazing to me some of the things that people will say. Does that bother you, or how do you handle that? You know, when I moderated the last presidential debate, and Kylie and Mary Hager and some of them showed me later some of the tweets that were going around, and some of the mild ones were, "Who is that old guy? Is that old guy on the Muppets that makes fun of the other Muppets?" And you know, I gotta say, the first time somebody says something like that about you, it takes some getting used to.
It really does, Bob. You know,
So how do you handle that?
In the beginning, it did, and I would find myself engaging with these people, like firing something off right away. Like they would say, you know, where did you come from? What are you talking about? And I would say, you know, thank you so much for writing. Are we having lunch? I guess we're not having lunch today. Or I would actually get their number and call them. And you know what's so interesting about this? When you call people on the phone, they'll say, "Oh, Gayle, I was having a bad day. I really like you."
Yeah.
It's amazing how they back down. But the thing about social media is that you can say the most vitriolic things with no accountability.
Yeah.
And when you challenge these people, they're probably somebody sitting in their basement with no underwear who are just randomly just saying stuff. So picture that for a second.
With no underwear.
With no underwear. They're just sitting down there with no accountability. But when you talk about people getting mad at you, I just had something just last week. We had the CEO of McDonald's on, and you know, they're going through a change right now. The guy was really great, and I said, well, you know, everybody knows you guys have the best French fries. And this cranky Yankee on Twitter said, "What WTF? What is that idiot talking about? There she goes, expressing her personal opinion when she's interviewing the CEO." And I tweeted him back, "We're talking about French fries." That's what let's really put it in perspective. So I think you just have to, you can't take it personally. You really can't. But for the most part, people are very nice. People are engaging. They really, and I can take constructive criticism. I really can. In fact, I like to hear constructive criticism. But when you hear somebody that's just vitriolic and mean and swearing and cursing and not making any sense, I refuse to take that in. But I do find myself, my kids always say, "Mom, back off, just leave it alone," and sometimes that's very difficult to do.
Who do you think is the person you made maddest in your career as a political correspondent, Dan?
Oddly enough, it was before I was covering politics. It was when I was at National Journal magazine as a very young reporter, and I was working on a story about some aspect of economic policy, and I went to interview the Secretary of the Treasury, who was Bill Simon at the time, William Simon, and he had had some staff turnover, a fair amount of staff turnover, and I was chatting casually with one of his assistants before we went into the interview, and I made a comment about that, and he said, "Well, you know, you could ask him about that." So at the end of the interview, I said to him something like, "Why is it that you have trouble keeping hold of staff? I mean, what is it? What is it?" And he took great umbrage, more than I realized, because when I got back to the office, the editor came to me and he said, "What did you say to William Simon?" And I tried to explain, and he thought it was a perfectly legitimate question and brushed it off, but that was one. Bob, if you cover politics these days, you're making somebody mad almost every day. Politics is so divisive. Sometimes you make, you know, candidates or their handlers angry with a particular story. That happens with some regularity. Most of the time, that kind of washes away. I mean, that'll last for a couple of days. You've been through that. Somebody will be furious with you. They'll call and complain mightily, and a week later, you know, they're fine. I mean, I had an episode recently with one of the campaigns in which they were quite angry for a couple of days, and I saw one of the people on the campaign about a week later, and you know, he was as friendly as could be.
Who was it?
I won't say.
Give us initials.
She always asks the question
Didn't you want to know who it was?
that nobody else will
Give
ask.
us the initials.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
But I learned an interesting lesson. You talk about social media and the degree to which people feel free to say the most outrageous and horrible things to you through an email or a tweet, but particularly through email. Or on the comments at the end of a story on the website. And I remember being at a conference. It was called the Daily Kos is a website, liberal website, and they had an annual gathering called Yearly Kos, and this was the first one, and it brought a lot of bloggers from around the country to Las Vegas for a convention. And I remember overhearing a conversation between two of them, and one of them said, "Man, I got the worst comments for something I posted the other day." And the other one said, "Never read your comments." And I thought, if these guys who live off blogging and interacting with people don't read their comments, there's no reason anybody else should worry about that. Yeah. And so you just have to ignore a lot of it.
You know, the maddest and the worst thing like that I ever got into was long before the day. I was just thinking of it as you were telling this story. It's years ago, and it was I can't even remember whatever campaign it was. We were on Halloween in Newark, New Jersey, at a rally, and the people, you could not move. Well, I had just joined up with the campaign from someplace else, so I had my suitcase with me, okay? And so the press bus was over here, and I'm trying to get on the press bus, and you just literally couldn't move, and there was a guy in front of me, and I said, "Listen, would you let me pass by? I've got to go." He said, "No." He said, I picked this spot out because I want to see what's happening. And I said, "Well, I'm really trying to get," well, he said, "You just have to go another way." And I said, "I'm not going another way, and I'm getting ready to," and I gave an explanation of what I was planning to do with him. And I don't know how I would have done it holding that suitcase, but I was planning to do it. And I basically kind of gently pushed him out of the way with the suitcase. And finally got over to the press bus, and never thought, I mean, things, in crowds, they happen like this from time to time. Now, there were 5,000 people who were at this rally. How is it that that person would be the next door neighbor of Richard S. Salant, who was the president of CBS News? I mean, what are the odds of that? I never said a word about it. And Mr. Salant called me on the phone, and he was a great guy, and he said, "Bob, what have you done?" And I said, I whatever I did, I shouldn't have done it. Dick, I realized I shouldn't have done it. It just got the best of me. He said, "That's fine." He said, "I probably would have done the same thing." But he said, "How would you feel about calling that fella?" I said, "I've got his phone number right here." And he said, "You don't have to apologize, just call him and tell him that you just wanted to talk to him." And so I did, and the guy could not have been nicer. He started laughing, and he said, "Oh, forget about it," and everything. And we both agreed that Richard Salant was one of the greatest Americans of all time, and we all went on to different
Bob,
things.
To Gayle's earlier point, occasionally, nobody uses phones anymore, but
Yeah.
occasionally you get a call from a reader, and if you pick up, they are startled that you've actually answered the phone. And they've called to complain, and they won't complain at that point.
Yeah.
Or if they leave a number and you call them back, just as Gayle said, they back off immediately. Or one thing that a lot of people don't understand is how we do what we do, and the constraints we're under and the time pressures. When you write a story on a deadline at a presidential debate, or we've all been under deadline pressure. We don't have a lot of time to look at it twice, let alone 3 times. And language that you use, you would improve if you took the time. And when you explain that to people, I remember I have a conversation with somebody. I said, "Well, your point is absolutely right, and that, if I had more time," but I said, "I had 45 minutes to write that story." And it's like opening people's eyes to the way the businesses operate.
And you're never nasty when you call. You say, "Listen, hi, it's Gayle King. I just got your message. I just heard what you had to say, and I just wanted to talk to you about it. What were you thinking? Why did you say it? And
why are you so mean?"
Yeah. What the hell is wrong with you? It's never that, but it's just, I just wanted to talk to you because I message received, and I just want to know if we can talk about it. And it is interesting how they always, 99% of the time, they back down.
Let's, I want to ask you about something serious, PJ, and that is, you started out at National Lampoon, then you were at Rolling Stone for a long, long time. I guess the biggest story in journalism right now
Boy, yeah.
is the
I tell you.
the story that the national that Rolling Stone did about University of Virginia. I'd just like to get your take on it.
Well, it's been a while since I've written for Rolling Stone, but I left to go to the Atlantic in 2000. But nonetheless, I do have to think that when Hunter S. Thompson dies and I leave and the factual reliability of a publication goes down, something is amiss. Yeah. But that was like, I mean, you talk about your teachable moments. Was there anything that was done right in that story and how it was edited and how it wound up in print? It violates, I mean, it's great J-school classroom lesson. Y'all read this, read the reaction to it, read what happened afterward, and you will know everything about what not to do as a journalist. You will, it covers the, did it leave out anything?
And yet no disciplinary action, Bob, in this case so far. Does that surprise you?
Well, they did ask Columbia Journalism School to do a study, and they published the study.
But none of the reporters or the editors, there's no...
Nobody's been
The
fired.
reporter,
Yeah.
none of the editors.
Does that surprise you,
No
PJ, that
fact.
there's
It does surprise me. I have to say that when I wrote for Rolling Stone, that I found that the fact checking and the editing they were rigorous, and I mean rigorous to the point of, okay, PJ, you said here you took this drug and you saw a 9-headed demon. Now, we have your notes here, and your notes say it had only 8 heads. And I would go, I'm making that up. As anyone in their right who hadn't taken that drug could tell, But no, they really used to be very tough about that. And so I never worked with these editors. I worked with Jan, but I mean, Jan owns the magazine.
Do you all agree? I mean, everybody knows we're in the midst of a communications revolution here. Nobody quite knows where any of this is going. We don't know what the future of newspapers printed on paper is going to be. I mean, I'm a newspaper reader. I like to get the newspaper out. I like to hold it in my hands. Like I like to read books. I like to smell books.
Yeah.
But it's generational. This is very generational, it seems to me. I mean, I still write notes in longhand, and I still clip things out of the newspaper. Kylie and the younger producers on Face the Nation, they do it all on their phone now. So I understand, but where do you all think this is all going?
Oh, wow.
In 25 words or less.
Yeah. I don't know where it's going. And I don't know, I mean, the whole problem is even if we know where it's going, how do you make it financially viable so that we all can eat, we all have jobs in 20 years' time? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the problem.
I'm not so worried about whether the newspaper is printed on paper or whether it's printed and you read it on a Kindle or an iPad. What I'm worried about is content. And I'm worried about, will the journalism of tomorrow follow the same standards that we have come to accept in mainstream journalism?
Well,
and by
Bob,
that,
I think if you're going to worry about content, you have to worry about business model. You have to worry about profit. It takes a lot of money to generate good content, especially the kind of thing you're doing. It's expensive to send you and all the folks with you over to where you want to be, and where you need to be, not where you want to be. And the thing is that the internet, let's face it, it was invented by the military and universities. Now, if I'm looking around trying trying to talk to people about how to make a profit are the first two places I'm going to go to the military and to, I mean, no offense to the fine university where we are sitting, but are those the two entities that I'm going to talk to first about making a profit? No. So, I mean, right from the get-go, the internet had a problem with it was the old, we lose a little bit on every deal, but we're going to make it up on volume sort of business strategy. And this thing's got to make money if the content's going to be any good.
Dan, the Washington Post, of course, was bought by Jeff Bezos. It was a public company, and he took it private, which I think is probably what will probably save newspapers. I'm not sure they can survive as public companies anymore. The New York Times is still public, but what are you guys doing? How has all this changed the Washington Post?
We've had two major changes. One, obviously, is the purchase, the sale by the Graham family, who were great stewards and wonderful owners. Ben Bradley, the late great Ben Bradley, always said that the first key to being a great editor of a newspaper is to have a great owner. And the Graham family, over many years, were great owners. Don Graham concluded that he could not figure out a way to make it viable in the long run, and looked for somebody that he thought might be able to come up with a fresher approach, and he got Jeff Bezos to buy it. That has been a very, very, very important thing to us for a couple of reasons. There's no question that the future is digital. The Washington Post is in the middle of a conversion and well along in a conversion to basically a sensibility of a digital-first news organization. The print edition is still important. It's important for revenue. But it is not the be-all and end-all that it was 20 years ago or even 5 years ago. We now think in terms of instantaneousness of news. We think now of the role of social media in finding an audience as opposed to looking for newspaper subscribers. And our goal is to build nationally and internationally as large an audience of readers online, phones, tablets, whatever, as we can possibly find. Jeff Bezos is pushing us very hard to expand in all those ways and is backing it up with money. But the second thing, and it goes to the other question, was the arrival of Marty Baron as our editor about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I guess it is now. And Marty reinstilled in the Washington Post a sense of journalistic ambitions and the sense of values, and the importance of reporting. I mean, we can talk about all the different ways in which people now can consume the news. And every news organization is using every platform possible. The key to it still is reporting. You have to be out where the news is. You have to have people who are willing to go out and do it, and you have to have a news organization financially viable enough to sustain that. And I think that there is a lot of commentary about events and about news. But the key to it still is the value of good reporting.
Gayle, what's your take on this? What do you think is the best way? What do you do on CBS This Morning, which CBS This Morning's slogan is "The news is back in the morning."
Yeah.
And I really congratulate you for that. But it seems to me you guys do it in a professional and a dignified way, but you're also very informal and very viewer-friendly. You bring people into it. You do softer stories toward the end of the broadcast. You do the hard news up at the top, which is kind of the way that I like it. How do you see it? How do you like the format? And what do you see? What is your role?
Well, I love the format. You know, just today in the airport when I was coming, somebody stopped me and said, you know, I used to watch fill in the blank. We hear this a lot, by the way. I used to watch, and they name various shows, and now I watch you guys. And I said, okay, why? And I always like to hear people's reasons why. And this one woman said, because every day I watch, I learn something different, which I think is a great compliment. Every day I watch, I learn something different. And when you look at the landscape of TV news, what CBS does is we are offering an alternative. There is something there for everybody. I feel that you can be smart, you can be funny, you can be entertaining, you can be informative, and you don't have to be a comedy show. You will never see Charlie Rose in a costume. You will never see a cooking demonstration. That's just not how we're set up to do, but you can cover all of those stories. And I like the format so much. I lived in Turkey when I was a kid, from 1st grade to 6th grade. My dad worked for the government. We were sent overseas, and when I came back to the States, we didn't have television. Nobody did. It wasn't just us, nobody did. So I was a big, voracious reader. But when we came back to the States, my father insisted that we had to watch the evening news every single night with Walter Cronkite, and that's the way it is. Because he said it's very important to be informed and to know what's happening every day. And I used to think, this news is so boring. Petticoat Junction could be coming on soon. Why do we have to sit and watch this? And so for me, I get a special charge, a special thrill, I have to say, when I walk in that building, and in our studio is Walter Cronkite's map. The map that used to sit behind him is now in the studio, and I'm sitting at that table. I mean, Bob, I'm blown away by that. I'm blown away that you guys can go to bed at night, the world can be one way, and you wake up in the morning, and it's different, and we get to tell you that. That comes with a lot of privilege, that comes with a lot of responsibility, and it's not something that anybody in the organization takes lightly. You said in the beginning, we have a huge team, and I believe in
And you've got
surrounding
Charlie
yourself.
Rose's number.
Yeah, I got Charlie.
That's
Rose's
what I love
number.
about it.
He's scary
how
smart
do you
and
do
he's
that?
a little naughty, which is good. Scary smart and a little naughty.
He is he's a great friend of mine,
He
and he's a
is,
great
he is.
reporter, and he's a great interviewer.
Yes, there's
But
nobody
I
like
think
him.
with the three of you there together, I mean, it really does click. And
Knock on wood, I really do. I think it really works.
I think people at CBS now like to be on the broadcast, and it used to be, you have to get up so early that they say, we need you on the morning news. You'd run and hide under the bed, and hope they can't
I've
find you.
heard that.
Tell them I got sick and had
Yes.
to, go
I
to
have a
Fort Worth
pedicure
or
in
something.
Peru, yes,
Yeah.
I've heard that.
So- but that's no longer the case. We
Yes,
really love
we're
it,
very
and
proud
I
of
don't
what
mean
you
for
do
this
there.
to be a commercial, but we're really
Keep talking.
really
Bob.
proud of what you do. Now, I've got to ask you one more question, and this, don't take this wrong, but this comes as a viewer inquires. A viewer asks me to ask you,
Ruh-roh.
do you buy your shoes first or the dress to go with them, or do you do the other way around?
It depends. It depends. I've been known to do both. I do love a good pair of shoes.
Yeah,
True.
I kind of had that feeling.
Yes, I do.
Holly, you have such, I'm so fascinated. How do you do it? How does a woman in these dangerous situations, is it different for you than it is for a male correspondent?
I get asked this all the time.
I know you do.
What's it like being a woman? And it's such a, it's so odd because it's really not any different. I mean, I certainly don't get treated any different by CBS. There's no, well, not that I'm aware of, there's never any discussion, should we send her or should we send a male reporter?
Well, given the choice, they send you. I mean, because you're so good at what you do. I mean, the guys can't keep up with you. But
Yeah.
it's just, just the danger. You have a daughter.
I have a daughter and I intend on being around while she grows up. As we just discussed, I'm scared, I don't take unnecessary risks. I don't like bang bang, as we call it. I don't like to run into that kind of thing. We think long and hard before we go anywhere. And the idea of the woman thing, there are parts of the world that we go to, particularly in the Middle East, that are more conservative. I'm sure that some of the people I'm dealing with view me differently. Perhaps they have all sorts of thoughts about whether or not a woman should be there. But in general, in the Middle East as well, men are incredibly respectful to women. And in fact, sometimes you have a slight advantage as a woman. Because firstly, you get access not just to the local men, but you get access to the local women in conservative areas, and you know that you can't go there, you can't talk to the women. Right. And then secondly, in lots of places in the world, it's just disarming for people to see a woman pop out of the back of a van in a flak jacket. It's just not what they expected. And it means they go the extra mile for you. They try a bit harder, or it just lightens the mood. That was certainly the case in Ukraine last year. That we'd be going through checkpoints, and the separatists would kind of open the back, they'd be armed, and they'd kind of open the back of the door, and the producer I was traveling with, Justine Redmond, and I would kind of say, hello, and they'd laugh, because it would lighten the mood.
Let me ask you a news question. Do you think there's going to be a deal with Iran on limiting nuclear weapons?
well, there seems to be
The framework is there.
framework of a deal. And I guess going forward, it's how much good faith there is on both sides. Because clearly, even if this deal comes to kind of fruition, either side could back out of it pretty quickly.
I'm not sure where this goes. I'm also kind of reserving judgment on whether this is the right thing or not. It seems to me it'll be in the details, and we don't know what the deal is until there's a deal. That's the way these things always work out.
How old is your daughter? I'm so stunned to hear this because see how you make assumptions. I assumed you were single and had no children. It never even occurred to me you had children.
I am single.
Me too, Holly. It's hard out here for him. Me too. But how old is your daughter?
My daughter's 4 years old.
Wow.
And she lives with me in Istanbul.
And what, do you have a nanny, or how do you handle do that?
Yeah. That's interesting. Sheryl Sandberg won't answer that question because she says men never get asked about
Yeah, but you're
child
gone.
care.
I know they never do. And what I mean,
question.
you are always on the road.
Right.
And so I assume you don't leave her there by herself.
I don't, well. And I have mixed feelings about the question. I kind of understand why Sheryl Sandberg won't answer the question.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like on the one hand, men don't get asked it, why should I answer it? On the
Because
other hand,
women are still doing the heavy lifting.
women
that's
still
why.
do the bulk of
That's
it.
why.
And then the other reason to answer is that there are lots of young women who want to do this job or other jobs and who want to know,
How do you do
can
it?
you do it?
And that's why,
Yeah,
that's
I know.
my interest
I
in
know
it.
you weren't.
Yeah.
Even as a guy, when I was a foreign correspondent and had kids, we couldn't have done it, the amount of traveling I was doing if we didn't have a nanny.
Yeah.
My wife needed a wife.
Yeah.
That's essentially what it came down to. It's just hard. I mean, it's very hard. Even for men, we're not. I mean, we're easily replaced. That's one good thing about us. But we are kind of needed. Somebody needs to be there.
BJ, we're kind of coming to the end here. What is your overall? You've been around almost as long as I have.
Yeah.
It's a long time. Your overall impression of the state of American journalism today, and if you want to give us your thoughts on the state of American politics as well.
Yeah, well, they're in a similar state in a way. I mean, it's just I'm a little worried about journalism. I'm a little worried about it was a trade, and I think that Bob and I both go back to, and you do. We all go back to when it was a trade. It was kind of a working class trade. If you came from a big Catholic family and you liked to read and you didn't like to get up early in the morning and lift things, you could be a reporter or a priest. That's basically it. So you go through that period in your youth where you go, women and whiskey, or just whiskey? Women and whiskey and free hockey tickets. Okay, now you're talking, And so, I worry that we might be in the modern world missing a little bit of that, bricklaying aspect of police reporting and stuff, and writing deaths elsewhere that people came up through, and also that we may be over-professionalizing something in the sense that I think modern journalists tend to take themselves a little too seriously. Speaking truth to power. Well, speaking truth to power is so easy as long as power is a long way away, I can sit right here and go, Robert Mugabe, you stink, and I'm safe. So you have to realize that there's a lot of bricklaying involved. It's basically carrying hods of information, and dumping them on the reader's roof, the viewer's roof, the listener's roof, whatever. It's not, it's not.
And what about politics?
Oh, Lord, honestly, they just can't behave, they're not drinking enough, they really aren't drinking enough. They're going back to their districts too often. where they more or less have to behave, there was a day when transportation wasn't so easy, where congressmen came to Washington and they stayed in Washington, and they got to know each other to a certain extent because they all went drinking at the same places, and they drank a lot. They were all up at the Oracle. They were at those various little private clubs up on the hill. And, they'd get loaded and make deals, They weren't always good deals, but I mean, at least they were deals. And now I think they all kind of scatter their separate ways. They don't seem to,
They're out
form a
raising
community.
money.
They're out raising money, yeah. They're
Which
on
has
the phone
become the
raising money,
point
and
of
they're rushing back
politics,
to their
not
district and,
passing laws or improving
they're
government.
they're not friends anymore. I mean, that's been overstated how well Reagan and Tip O'Neill got along. I don't think they were bosom buddies, but they could have a drink after work. They could punch out like Wile E. Coyote, and at the end of the cartoon, and these people just are not friends anymore.
I think that's it. Well, I think I know when it's come to a point where it's a good place to stop, and I think that's a good way. Thank you all so much. Yeah, guys. And before you go, we don't have time. We've run past the deadline, but thank you for that. I'll get to her in a minute. 58 years ago, when I was a student, it was the end of my sophomore year here at TCU, I got my first paid job in journalism, a full-time job. I was hired by a little radio station here in Fort Worth. And because that was where it all started for me, I wanted this to be the place, and I wanted you all to be the first to know that this summer I'm going to retire. It's been a great adventure. I'm one of the luckiest people in the world because as a little boy, as a young reporter, I always wanted to be a journalist. And I got to do that. And not many people get to do that. And I couldn't have asked for a better life or something that was more fun and more fulfilling. That little job at KXOL, which by the way paid $1 an hour, and they had the most unusual overtime system I've ever heard of. I've never heard of one since like it. The first hour of overtime was 90 cents, the second hour was 80 cents, the third hour, really. And we always used to say that if you worked 11 hours, you had to pay them a dime. But it was, this is true. This is like I'm sitting here. This was true. This was how it worked. But that job led to other jobs in journalism. Even when I went into the Air Force, 3 years I was there. I was always the editor of military publications. I came back to Fort Worth after the Air Force, and because Phil Record, who was the night police reporter at the Star-Telegram, knew me because we had covered so many wrecks together on the police beat. He was promoted to night city editor, and there was an opening for the police reporter, and so he promised me, or he recommended me for the job, and I became the police reporter at the Star-Telegram. That, of course, led to a job at Channel 5 television, and that, of course, led to my eventually coming to CBS in New York. I've never believed much in the self-made man theory. I think we all need a little help, and I had a lot of help along the way. I'm especially indebted to the Star-Telegram because when I got there, Phil Record taught me how to be a reporter. Editor Jack Butler then sent me to Vietnam, which was the turning point in my professional career. And publisher Amon Carter Jr.'s wife found me a wife. It was one-stop shopping for me at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And Georgianne Carter is here tonight. Georgianne, where are you, honey? There she is, right there. And once I got to CBS, I had this series of remarkable bosses. Bill Small, who was the Washington bureau chief, who hired me when I walked in off the street, literally, without an appointment. I later found out I'd walked in on someone else's appointment, and they thought in the beginning I was the other guy. I was the only guy that was ever hired by, CBS that they thought they were, well, they knew by then. But it turned out that the Washington bureau chief knew James A. Byron, who was the news director at Channel 5 here in Fort Worth. He called him and he gave me a recommendation. And that's how I got to CBS. And then I had this wonderful boss, Richard S. Salant, who was the epitome of the values that CBS News has always stood for. And then down through the years, Les Moonves, who was the chief of CBS, the CEO of CBS, who put me in the anchor chair after Dan Rather left. Sean McManus, who was my great good friend, and we worked together during that very, very difficult time at CBS News. And then Jeff Fager, the executive producer of 60 Minutes. And then one of the most remarkable people I've ever known, and my current boss, David Rhodes. David is right over here. David, stand up. I want to make sure people see you. The truth is, I'm half as old. I'm twice as old as David Rhodes. And that kind of made people say, well, why have you decided to retire? That might be a hint that somebody's telling me. But he is very precocious. His brother told me that when he was in the second grade, he was the only second grader that carried a briefcase to class. It's true. But he has done a remarkable job at CBS News. And one of the reasons that I have decided this is the time for me to retire is I'm so proud of where CBS News is now. We've, like any large organization, we have had our ups and downs. We're on a high right now, and with shows like CBS This Morning, with the real emphasis in hard news, with a lot more foreign reporting that others are doing at the other places by people like Holly. Face the Nation, I think, is better than it has ever been. And I am... and what I want to say is this was a total team effort, and my partner and my equal partner in all of this, someone I have worked with for 25 years, she was there when we decided to go to an hour, when we finally moved to number one. She was right there with me, and we've been together all the way. And there's nobody on the professional side of my life that I feel more indebted to or owe more to than my great friend, Mary Hager. Mary, I just want you to stand up. There she is, right over here. Mary was about the age of these other kids that work with me now when she came to work with me, and we were covering Capitol Hill together. And we had some great times. It was the time when the Contract for America and all that was going on. And one day, I mean, this is true, Mary and I worked 50 straight days without a day off. And then we were off for a couple of 3 days, and we'd worked 39 straight days without a day off. And I'll tell you something else. You couldn't have made me not show up. It was such an exciting, there were so many exciting things going on. and Mary was always to work before I got there. And it was a great experience for both of us. And now to be working with her when Face the Nation is in the place that it is a wonderful thing for me. I've received many forms of recognition over the years, but no recognition, no honor that I've received is more important to me or means more to me than when they put my name first on the journalism school here and then last year on the College of Communication. Thank you. I think some of my professors probably would have a heart seizure if they realized that my name was on those schools now after some of the grades I turned in, especially kindly old Dr. Romaninghi, who gave me a C in Spanish that final semester, which I needed to get out of here. But he believed in mercy over justice, and I got that C, and I took my diploma and I left before they took it away from me. But it was a wonderful thing. I'm so proud also of where the journalism school and the college have come in these past 11 years. When they asked me about putting my name on the journalism school, I said, I would be greatly honored to do that, but I only want to do it if you want to take it to another level. And I said, we must strive to be the best in the country. We might not get there, but we're certainly not going to get there unless we aim high and unless we try to do that. And they said they would. We now have, it took us about 3 years to do it, but we raised the money. We're not the best school yet, but we have a chance to, because we now have a facility that is as good as any journalism or communications college has in the country. We still have a ways to go, but I think with the right attitude, with the right vision, I think we can get there, and I think that's possible. I believe we can do it. It's going to take a lot of people working together to get that done, but I think it is doable. And finally, I just want to say one thing. Of all the people that have been with me all along the way, the one that counts the most, the one who has done the most, and in fact, every once in a while, she's the one who comes up with these commentaries that I write on Sunday. She's truly a great muse. She is that young woman, George Ann Carter, found for me 48 years come Wednesday. We will have been married. My dear wife, Pat. Turn around. She is just simply the best. Well, I want to thank all of you all for coming. I mean, to those of you students who are thinking about going, especially into journalism or into these communications jobs, all I can tell you is I can't think of anything I could have done that I could have gotten more satisfaction from and more downright fun. And when you come right down to it, that's why you ought to choose to do whatever it is you want to do. Don't worry about the success. Pick something you like to do. If you get good at it, the success part takes care of itself. For me, it was a great life. I've often said if my life ended tomorrow, I would have gotten my money's worth. I never imagined that I would have the kind of experiences that I had in journalism, and I feel like one of the luckiest people in the world. And to all of you at the Journalism College, at the College of Communication, I just say to you, let's still try to be the very best we can. Always aim high, because if you don't aim high, there's no way that you're going to move very far. Thank you for what you've done, and thank you all for coming tonight. I love you all.
Wow. about bearing the lead.
Whoa.
Wow.
Thanks, Holly.
That's what you call bearing the lead. Oh my God.
You're gonna be missed. You're gonna be missed.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow.
Thank you very much. See ya.
That was something.
Jeez.
Well, I'll be darned.
Yeah.
It's kind of stunning.
Well, you know, I watch all these senators being led off by their
I
staff.
wonder how long he's been thinking
I
about
want to
it.
leave while I
know.
can still do
Man.
the job, you know?
Wow, Bob.
Yeah, but
Wow.
It's,
How long have you been thinking about
Making the
this?
news.
Yeah.
well, they tried to, I was going to retire last year and they asked me to stay another year, and